Yeah, hi, hello. We have Miss Aati Rajaratnam here. Welcome to the session, ma'am. Today, I want you to elaborate something about reinforcements. Like, is it a good thing to give reinforcements to children, especially at home? Because now and then parents, they reinforce giving chocolates, toys, whatever the child asks for.
So, psychologically, behavior was always reinforced because at one point they believed from the experiments of Skinner, of Pavlov and all that, that if you gave a reinforcement, somehow behavior was increased. And I am sure in your B.Ed course and all that you had a huge thing about learning theories. However, many of those were animal studies. Okay? So, personally I believe when children really need to develop a new habit, support, encouragement, these kind of attitudes from the parent actually reinforce better than material things. You know, as a teacher, you yourself will know when you used to give stars, at one point children start saying, you keep the stars, I don't want to do it, right? And also when it comes to chocolates and all that, in our generation we never got chocolates easily. So when a parent said, take this chocolate, we were willing to work for it. But today children get chocolates all the time, you can't really give that as a reinforcer. When I say reinforcement, I am personally not a very big fan of it, because when we talk about reinforcement, we also talk about bribing children. So, if you do this, I will do that, or we are talking about threats, if you don't do this, I will do this, or we are making children believe that somebody else is in control of their behavior. I personally believe, one, let us model what the children need to learn. Right? When we model a behavior, it is easier for the child to know what is expected and how to do that consistently. It works better than reinforcement any day, because they know the adults are also doing this, this is what is expected of me, and then they are able to continue it. Second, apart from modeling, it is very important to listen to what children have to say. We have, as parents, as adults, as teachers, this attitude where we think we can give advice and lecture and the child will change. You know, when we were young, we used to do this, children in Somalia don't have food, all this story. It has no meaning for the child, because the child is saying, why are you giving all the story, just tell me what I should do, right? When we listen to children, usually we know what they are saying. Now, you are a working mom. When the child comes and says, you know, that child's mother is always making payasam, you are never making it. What is the child saying? I want payasam. That is all the child is telling you. Instead of that, you feel guilty that you shouldn't have a job, you feel guilty that you are not taking care of your child, all this, and the child starts realizing, when I say this, my mother has new reactions. So, you feel guilty and then you start giving lot more things. So, these are the ways in which reinforcement becomes a very complex and a very manipulative part. What I would suggest instead of reinforcement is to understand what children are trying to say, what they are trying to do. And when they do something well, support them through it so that they are able to improve their own performance. For this, as a parent, when we do well in office, when we do well at work, share those experiences with the children. When we do badly, also come and share those experiences, saying, today this happened, but I learnt this. So, when you start sharing real experiences with children, it becomes a beautiful model for them to be able to emulate over a period of time. As opposed to, if you do this, I will give you this, because then the child starts saying, today you gave me one chocolate for writing one page, so if I write 2 pages, will you give me 2? Then it becomes a manipulation. So, I would not use reinforcement as a parent or as a teacher.
Okay. Now, how do you differentiate, ma'am, between reinforcements and motivations, especially extrinsic motivation we give, right? How do you differentiate between the two?
See, reinforcement and extrinsic motivation, all of these, the lines blur somewhere. Okay? So, this is where, when I use the word modeling, we are always in control. So, when I want the child to speak in a certain way, behave in a certain way, do a certain thing, I am always in control because I am always doing it. When I am always doing it, I have a 90 to 100% chance that my child is also going to always do it. It works both ways, because it is good for me and it is also good for the child. Whereas, when I am just going to externally motivate, when I am externally reinforcing, I am not giving the child an internal focus. and I'm not giving a child the internal control, the internal locus of control as we call it, to be able to understand, become aware and regulate their own behavior. In the long run, when a child is able to become aware, understand and regulate their behavior, they have better rounded, well-rounded personality as opposed to a child who's always working for something external. A child who's always working external will never find satisfaction and contentment, but a child who's internally focused with awareness, with understanding and regulation is always able to learn, remain a lifelong learner. They're more growth centric, their mindset is very growth centric, and more important, when there's success or failure, they're able to deal with it better. But a child who's always externally motivated and reinforced or extrinsically motivated, they're always ones that find failure unimaginable. They're not able to accept failure, they're not able to bounce back or be resilient. But children who have the internal control always have more resilience. So I wouldn't differentiate, I would rather develop the internal locus of control, where right from the beginning I allow children to make small mistakes, to have small failures and bounce back on their own through my support and guidance.
Learning from their mistakes. Okay. And as you told, many children model their behavior by imitating whatever they see around them. And suppose like they are developing this way, how do we develop logical and reasoning skills in them?
That's a completely different area. Logic and reasoning are because of interaction with the environment, right? When I talked about internal locus, it's emotional, but logic usually comes when I'm experimenting with something. So when you talk about play, when you're talking about logical reasoning, right from the beginning, when you allow children to explore, that usually starts setting the base for later on logical thinking, because children will do things repeatedly. They may not know that this is logic, but they will keep attaching something, fixing something, see it's working, and subconsciously they're picking up the way in which logic is developed over a period of time. Another way to develop it is to have lot of games which they can do systematically with rules, and this is after 8 years, which will develop logic. But in the younger ages, developing logic usually is only through play. After the age of 8, when they are able to understand rules, we can introduce games with rules which will help them with logical reasoning. But right from the beginning, when children struggle with things, don't rush to solve the problem. Let the child experiment with, explore the problem, because that is one of the ways in which long-term reasoning is developed. Because whenever the child comes and asks you, Amma, how is this done? And you rush to solve it. Or when they are not able to put on the shoe, you go and put on the shoe. They never learn how to do it on their own. If they never learn how to do it on their own, logic becomes a problem.
Yeah, that is true. And one more thing, it has been a common observation. I have observed few parents, especially some of my close friends. They have very young children, like pre-KG children. And you must be aware of this app, TikTok app. They look at this app, the child is very good at posing, moving lips according to the music, all those things. I just want to know, I'm just curious, is this a good thing that they are doing to make the child, work with that app, play according to that music, all those things?
Personally, I'm very technology, or rather anti-technology. Okay. I would rather spend a lot of time developing genuine relationships than the social media approved relationships which are fake. I'm always putting on a show for somebody, I'm always trying to be something else, someone else, imitating someone. It doesn't really work. But when you talk about genuine relationships, when you and your child just go for a walk and enjoy that silence, or you go for an ice cream and you have a lot of laughter, or you just genuinely sit down and enjoy a Sunday, that is always more important for the child than posing for something, doing something for recognition. Again, this goes back to recognition. If I am always going to do something for fame and recognition, I never understand how to do something for contentment and satisfaction. In the long run, Contentment and satisfaction are more important than recognition from the outside and the number of likes or responses on social media. So I would, as a parent, as a teacher, as an adult, always encourage genuine relationships and not just the ones that go on to social media.
One more thing I wanted to ask was, like in foreign countries and all, we have lot of sensory bins. We have water play, sand play, all those things are there. Can you just give some tips to parents where they can include, enhance the sensory awareness of their children?
We basically have many senses, but we talk only about 5 senses in our science textbooks, right? But there are millions of senses in the body, and like even gravitational awareness, body awareness, awareness of the joints, what we call the proprioceptive sense. There are so many senses. My simple suggestion to parents, right from day one, let the children walk bare feet, explore with their feet, and also touch different textures, different things, play in the sand, play in the water, play with grass, play with mud, play with stones, play with everything. Because the more I experiment with both my feet and my hands, that's a very important area for the brain in its learning. The next is the olfactory sense, which is the smell sense. Have different, and if you look at methods like the Montessori method and all that, they specifically have sensory kits for all the senses. But I don't even need to go into a structure. When the child comes into the kitchen, you can let them smell something and say, can you guess if it's a fruit or a beverage? Simple things like this, where the child is able to not only name, oh, this is a lemon, this is coffee powder. It's not like that. Child just explores. Take them out for a walk. Now, Bangalore has few parks, unlike other cities. When you take them to a park, let them smell different leaves, different flowers. Let them have that rich olfactory experience. Taste. Let them experiment with new tastes and new textures, right? And when you look at every sense, and when you talk about the visual sense, expose them to different colors, shades, different activities where there's craft, etc. You can also look at different pictures together, and all of these are very, very useful. See, even if you can just go around your garden, your school has a wonderful garden. If you go around, you have different leaves. Fallen leaves children can pick up. They can just sort it in terms of shape, in terms of color, in terms of, these are all sensory experiences, right? When you talk about auditory sense, you can just make the child close their eyes. Somebody, one of their classmates can call them, they can guess who it is. All these are ways in which we can develop the senses, or rather expose the senses to different experiences. When we can just think out of the box for 2 minutes. As children, we created so many games for all our senses. We would make a person close their eyes, we would touch and say, tell me who touched you now. Or we would use a texture and say, is this cold or hot? These are all small games that parents can play at home. So I would rather just let parents experiment, in the kitchen. When they go for a bath, warm water, let the child decide what temperature the water should be. Even that's a sensory experience. So in a very commonsensical way, what I would ask parents to do is to be present with the child and enjoy games together. It need not be with the intention to sensory stimulate the child, but to just enjoy the time with the child. When you are present with the child, the games will come naturally.
And one more thing, ma'am, it is a common observation, especially in our society, that children, even adults who are introverts, they are not given the same respect or recognition that extroverts get. And can you elaborate on that?
I am a very painfully shy introvert. Okay, and most of you know that, because outside my work I won't have conversation with you. But different times in history, different skills have been considered good. For example, at one point aggression was considered very good, especially when countries were plundering each other, kings were fighting against each other. Aggression was considered good. Today the same aggression is not considered good. Like even about 50 years back, an aggressive man was considered a very good leader. Today, if you notice, leadership models are exactly against aggressive people. So in different points in history, different qualities based on what was required were highlighted. Introversion, as a result, was suppressed. But when you look at cultures where poetry is very well respected, music is very well respected, introversion is actually considered as a very important asset. So it's more attitudinal. than or rather I would say societal. You know, in terms of society's pressure, we think extroversion is good. But if you have an introverted child, I would suggest that you respect that, because it's a natural part. Otherwise, they're going to always have masks. In front of this one, I should be like this. In front of this one, I should be like this. Even introverts, when they really like something, when they really want to achieve something, they can speak. Like right now, in my work, I really love working with children, with parents and with teachers. So here I can bring out my communication very well. But when it comes to being with a friend or something like that, I'm usually very silent because I'm very content with myself. Okay, so introverts usually can adapt to a situation very well, and they're very comfortable with themselves. As a parent, the only thing we need to do is to give them space for that.
Okay. And what about as a teacher in a classroom? Suppose we have a child who is introvert. The child may know the answer. He may have 1,000 ideas in his mind, but it won't come.
You could create an opportunity for them. You could say, would you like to tell me? And if you feel he won't speak up, you can even say, I know you have beautiful ideas. Can you draw it for me on a piece of paper? Okay, you can do it in some way, some form of expression, as long as you give them a chance. And you can give them a little extra time to open up, because they may take time because they are genuinely shy. Okay, and that's where I use a visual or another form. You can say, after class you can come and tell me. You know, even those can be used as strategies by the teacher. That helps.